This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Savage Real talk, no filter on Savaged Unfiltered. Savaged.
Hey guys, welcome to Savaged Unfiltered. I'm your host, Savage here. Today we have a guest, a U.S. Navy veteran and Pennsylvania state. The words I'm trying to get there, guys. It's still early in the morning for me, so I haven't had the cup of coffee. But he has a book out. I want to get into that with his book and some of his Navy experience. But without further ado, let's bring him on here. This is Peter. How you doing, Peter? Welcome to the show.
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Sorry about that, man. The coffee hasn't kicked in yet, so I do apologize for that. But let's start out with some of your Navy experience. I know you're a Navy veteran. I want to go into that before I go into this book, Trust Shattered here. It seems to be a political book, but I want to talk a little bit about your Navy experience. What made you pretty much join the Navy and enlisted in the Navy, sir?
Well, I was one of those kids that kind of always knew he was going to go into the military. I played, art soldier all the time as a kid and just expected to join the military. And when it came time, junior, senior year of high school, I started looking at the branches of service and just trying to decide which branch. And I chose the Navy because of tradition. There's something very comforting about tradition. And at that time, the Navy hadn't even changed their uniforms in over 200 years. So, they still do a lot of very ceremonial, traditional stuff, like ringing a bell for the hourly watch and ringing bells when the captain comes on or off a ship. And you still have to stop and salute the flag and request permission to board a Navy vessel. And there was just a lot of tradition involved, and that was appealing to me. So that's why I chose the Navy. I joined. Oh
yeah. They've always, they're one of the branches that always believes in the tradition of the original roots of the branch and everything else. Like you said, the uniform hasn't changed much. I don't think it has changed ever. So there's a lot of tradition behind the Navy, of course, and everything else. But not only in the Navy, but it looks like you kind of dabbled into the U.S. Postal Mail Service. Is that true? Or
yeah, about 8 or 10 years ago, I gave up my almost lifelong career in the hospitality industry, restaurant management and the like, and got tired of management and ended up a mail carrier. So yeah, I'm a rural mail carrier now. Been doing it for almost 10 years.
Yeah. So, you kind of dabbled all over the place, from the U.S. Navy to, the U.S. Postal Service. You mentioned, the hospitality service with the restaurant industry. It seems like you've done it all, pretty much. Wow. An angle of different careers over the years, Peter. And then, of course, you've got this book here, Trust Shattered. Let's get into that. What made you write this book, and what's some of the backstory of this book, Peter?
The framers of the United States Constitution envisioned a nation where each citizen would be a guardian of liberty, imparting the values of freedom to future generations. Regrettably, we have largely strayed from this path. Trust Shattered, Cases of Government Betrayal, delves into approximately 40 instances where our government has deviated from its foundational principle of protecting our rights. Pre-order a copy of Trust Shattered for yourself at trustshattered.com.
Well, it's my fourth book, and after my third one, which was called A More Tyrannical King, I was in the third one. I was comparing King George's government circa 1775 to current government to see which one was more tyrannical. And the spoiler alert, the subtitle is How the Federal Government Became More Tyrannical Than King George. While I was writing that one, I had the idea for this one. So this one is a collection of about 45 examples of how government has betrayed our rights in one way or another. And those 45 examples are divided up into three categories, and it's based on John Locke's life, liberty, and property. So it's betrayed estates, betrayed liberties, and betrayed bodies are the three parts of the book. It was interesting to write because I went out of my way to make sure that I did not include anything in this book that anybody could point at and consider a conspiracy theory. Everything in it is easily verifiable. Most of the things are things that, the government got caught doing and admitted to us about 20 years later. That seems to be the average anyway, the 20-year thing. I tried really hard to write it in such a way that if you're like me and you're already really skeptical about government, then you'll read it and maybe you'll learn a thing or two. Maybe you didn't know one of the examples, or maybe you didn't understand how this project was a sub-project of this one or something like that. But my goal is that after you...
Yeah, you have to be careful, Peter. Like you mentioned conspiracy, right? You have to be careful, especially political books now these days. Like you could write a certain... Or put it in certain topics, right? In these books today, and then you'll catch attention, of course. But then when you start putting in more details, you get people on. It seems to be people on the left that will question it. Well, that didn't really happen. Or if you don't catch the attention from people on the left, you'll catch the independent viewers, right? Well, that necessarily didn't happen the way he's presenting it in this book. Like, you're wrong, and then now you're considered the conspiracy theorist, and now, if you're not a conspiracy theorist, you're creating spin to the narrative and everything else. Then you're just no different than a regular media journalist, So I get what you're saying with that, yeah.
So let me give you two examples out of the book of how I dealt with that whole trying to avoid conspiracy theory.
Yeah. How do you avoid all that, Peter? Yeah, because I'm
Well, for
curious.
one, it's like a 30,000 foot view.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Savage.
Get into a whole lot of detail because oftentimes it's the detail where people start saying, hey, that's a conspiracy. So chapter 2 or 3 is on the Tuskegee syphilis experiments. So the official narrative is that the U.S. government health services studied 600 black men from Tuskegee, Alabama, who had syphilis, studied them for 40 years.
Right.
The conspiracy part of it is there's a whole lot of people out there that believe that these 600 men were given syphilis by the government. Now, I don't know. I wasn't there. This started in 1923 or something like that. So I only included the official narrative that they found 600 men that had syphilis and they studied them. And then, of course, roughly 10 years after they started the study, it became common knowledge that penicillin cured syphilis, but none of these 600 men were offered the cure, and they were studied for 30 more years. So that's how I dealt with that. I looked at it from a very high level and avoided what what many people might consider to be the conspiracy part of it. The other example is the chapter on.
I was going to chime in if you don't mind. Don't you think that's kind of baffling where people are just like, like going back to like the conspiracy and, questioning bacteria and viruses, you mentioned syphilis and all that. People are, questioning COVID like, oh, well, the way they question it is like, why would the government manipulate viruses and bacteria, through laboratories and stuff like that?
That's a good question.
This is nothing new, folks. I mean, you've seen this, from the Spanish flu, right, of the 1920s. You've seen this with measles, chickenpox, all this stuff. I mean, it's nothing new, Peter. I mean, the government's been doing this for years, let alone working with other countries in that aspect. So, I just wanted to throw that out there because people are always questioning bacteria and viruses where, it's the new thing now that these governments are manipulating and corrupting and all that. No. It's they've been doing this for years. Yeah.
Yeah. As long as they've, as long as they realize that there was any chance of doing it, they've been trying it. I mean, the why would our government do this is a great question. And that's kind of what the point of the book is. I mean, there's a chapter in there about the San Francisco biological warfare experiments. In the 1950s, the U.S. government released bacteria over the city of San Francisco just to see how it would spread. 750,000, 750,000 United States citizens in this city were used as test subjects without their knowledge or consent. Why would our government do that? So that's one of the chapters in the book too. But I
thought we're supposed to be a constitutional republic, right, Peter?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
that's that was thrown out the window years and years ago, but
yeah. The other chapter that kind of highlights how I dealt with conspiracy theory stuff is there's a chapter in there about January 6th. Well, the chapter about January 6th basically starts out by saying, doesn't matter to me right now. It's not relevant to this chapter, whether this was an insurrection or a protest or a riot or whatever. That part, just ignore that for now. Here are the facts. On January 6th, 250,000 or 120,000, I forget the number. Over 100,000 people showed up. Police were woefully unprepared. On one side of the building, violence broke out. On the other side of the building, the police removed barricades and allowed protesters into the Capitol. What's relevant to this chapter of the book is what happened after January 6th. How 3,000 people were rounded up and tracked down based on cell phone location data, credit card transactions and bank records, and airline flight information, all of which was obtained by the FBI without a warrant because what's known as the third-party doctrine and national security letters that were authorized by the Patriot Act, all of which violates the, if not the letter of the law, at least the spirit of the law against searches and seizures. So I go through how they were tracked down and how they've been treated after the fact. And I just talk about the prisoners. So whether it was violent, even if every one of those guys that was tracked down and charged with a crime was guilty of that crime, even if every one of them was a violent insurrectionist, that doesn't mean they don't have the protections of law and the constitutional republic. You can't track somebody down from information that you obtained illegally. You do that, normally it would get thrown out of court.
And, Peter, they're still doing that to this day. I just had a gentleman on, I don't want to say recently, but going back, now maybe 10, more than that, probably about 20, 25 episodes ago, where he was a world-renowned Broadway actor. He was part of the Broadway production up in New York called Jesus Christ Superstar. Mm-hmm. And he decided, right, to practice his free speech, his First Amendment rights, folks, went up to the Capitol peacefully, was not one of those. I mean, because don't get me wrong, Peter, there were people that were insurrectionists and everything else, and they broke into federal buildings. I will give people credit to say, people that were up there, they shouldn't have done what they've done. I'll agree to that. But there were people, bystanders that you just mentioned, that are still being harassed by the FBI and other federal departments for stuff that they didn't do. People like, James Beeks that I had on this show. I don't know if that name rings a bell to you, but he was up there, okay, exercising his First Amendment rights peacefully. Wasn't showing any forms of aggression, any forms of, provoking other people. But it seemed to be after that, the FBI, federal agents, tracked him down and decided to put charges on him and actually was arrested on federal charges of just basically being up at the Capitol, exercising his First Amendment rights. And I'm repeating myself, folks, to you so you can understand, because these are people like James Beeks and, thousands of others that are still being harassed for being up there. They're calling them extremists. I've heard terms as MAGA extremists, right? If you don't fit the left's narrative, you're a MAGA extremist. You're an insurrectionist. You're this, you're that. They're labeling January 6th one of the worst forms of our history in America. That is being above 9/11. They're labeling January 6th worse than 9/11.
Right.
That's sick.
It is, and it, it's control of the language is what it is.
Yeah.
By
Twisting the language, I call it.
Yeah, by immediately starting with the insurrection word, and now here it is years later where they keep using that word, even though of the 3,000 people that were charged with, or that were rounded up into 1,200 that have been charged, not a single one of them has been charged. Not a single one of them has been charged with insurrection, but they keep using that word. And they're using that word on purpose because they want to paint that group of people as violent extremists.
Well, mostly you're seeing it through the media, right? Mainstream. They want to sell that narrative. They want to twist the language. They want to create the spin. And people that are not very educated, on the Constitution and those aspects will go along with the narrative. They'll say, well, those people were dangerous. Those people were violent. To an degree, there may have been some people up at the Capitol that committed to dangerous rhetoric. Yeah. But there was a lot of people that stood there, and there's videos circulating all over the internet, Peter, where they actually show certain Capitol Police there in Washington allowing these people to come into federal buildings.
Right. But you're not allowed to question the narrative. I mean, the giant bronze doors, I think they're called the Columbus doors. The giant bronze doors of the Capitol have magnetic locks that can only be unlocked from the inside. And it's a double set of doors. Like, you have to go through these big giant doors, and then there's another security door on the inside. All of which controlled exclusively by the inside of the building. So who opened those doors and let all of those people in? But if you say that out loud, then, you must be one of them MAGA extremist people. Somebody climbed in through a window and ran over and unlocked the doors. I don't know. Maybe they did, but there's security cameras everywhere. Show me the video.
You have to understand something, Peter. Like, these windows are not your typical office windows, right? These doors are not your typical office doors. They are like armed to the gazoo.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're using some of these windows, I'm told, are like, bulletproof glass. I mean, they're really strong. You just can't take, I mean, you would have to be really, really strong with a powerful arm to break these windows.
Yeah, those Columbus doors.
I mean, even with a brick.
Those Columbus bronze doors I talked about, they weigh tons each. Like, each one of those doors weighs over a ton, and they will actually, they're thick enough and heavy enough that they will literally withstand mortar fire. But yet somehow people just walk right through them. Anyway, but that's again, that part borders into the conspiracy. So I didn't put that in the book. In the book, I talk about the rights that were violated after the fact. And I do talk about, Jacob Chansley, the so-called QAnon shaman. There's video out there, and there has been since the beginning, video of Jacob Chansley being escorted around the Capitol building by Capitol Police. There's video of him telling his people, I think they were in the Senate chamber, he was telling everybody there, respect the space, be peaceful, But the jury in Jacob's case was never allowed to see that video. Now think about that from a courtroom. I mean, we've all seen courtroom dramas, right? There's exculpatory evidence rules.
Oh, of course.
If the prosecutor is in possession of evidence that could possibly be used by the defense, it is the duty of the prosecutor to turn it over. And if he doesn't do that, it's like an automatic mistrial. So who was the prosecutor in the January 6th cases? Well, that's the federal government. Who owned all of the security videos? That would be the federal government. So the same federal government that is charging these people with crimes and prosecuting the offenses owns the evidence that the defense needs and wouldn't turn it over. That's a violation of the Brady laws and exculpatory evidence rules.
Yeah, well,
Following some breaking news out of Athens, Georgia.
2 colleges have canceled classes today as police look for a murderer.
Laken Riley was described as a shining light.
Dean's List nursing student.
Police arrested 26-year-old Jose Antonio Ibarra.
Ibarra crossed into Texas illegally back in September of 2022, then was released into the United States on parole.
We're confident this border is secure.
We have a secure border.
We agree that the border is secure.
And we have a process in place to manage migrants at the border.
The border is closed. The border is secure.
We have taken unprecedented action.
Look, the border is not open.
Fox News can now confirm that Jose Antonio Ibarra was busted last year in New York City. But ICE didn't even have time to put in a detainer on him because, hey, he was already back out on the streets.
Democrats like to say that no one needs an AR-15 for self-defense. That no one could possibly need all 30 rounds. But when this rifle is the only thing standing between your family and a dozen angry Democrats in Klan hoods, you just might need that semi-automatic and all 30 rounds.
Meet career politicians Tammy Baldwin and Joe Biden. They've been bobbing along for years, but what have they really done for you? After 25 years together in D.C., they agree on nearly everything, and she votes with him 95.5% of the time. On their watch, American families are paying more for everything and are vulnerable to a wide-open southern border that's risking the safety of every American. It's time we stop electing politicians that just nod along and send a real problem solver to Washington. It's time to retire Tammy Baldwin.
Why aren't they bringing that up? Like, you have actual politicians, big figureheads. Mm-hmm. They know this. It's in the Constitution. They're violating the Constitution. They're violating the same oath that they promised never to violate to begin with.
Right.
Never go over. But yet again, they're doing it. And they're getting away with it, Peter. They're getting away with it left and right. I mean, you could clearly see that through the Biden administration. Probably in my own aspects, one of the most corrupted presidential administrations in modern day history. I think he's worse than Nixon, to be honest with you. But yet again, we're not allowed to discuss that. We're not allowed to talk about that. Because if we do, again, there goes those terms again. Insurrectionist, extremist, racist, white supremacy. Like, all those names come up. Whatever you say, like, you're labeled that. You're ousted because that can't be discussed. But yet again, they're allowed to discuss it.
You're allowed to discuss anything. And that's what we've lost in this. Here,
yep.
I blame we the people. I don't blame government. Since the beginning of time, we've all known, our founding fathers knew, Socrates, Aristotle, everybody has known government becomes corrupt. No matter what form of government it is, no matter how big it is, government always becomes corrupted. And we've always known that. So I blame we the people because we didn't listen to John Jay. John Jay, author of, I believe it's 5 of the Federalist Papers, first Chief Justice of the United States, one of the, in my opinion, most underrated of the Founding Fathers. He's got a quote that guides what I do. And the quote is, every member of the state ought diligently to read and study the Constitution of his country and teach the rising generation to be free. By knowing their rights, they will sooner perceive when they are violated and be better prepared to defend and assert them. We failed at that.
So Peter, I have a question for you. I know you have a book that's it says Trust Shattered. You're going into an aspect here before we close it out here on the show, but like you're going into an aspect where it says the trust was shattered, right, because of the betrayal of our government towards the people. You put in an aspect of your conversation there where it says that you're blaming we the people. Like, where did we go wrong? Did we allow too much trust in our own government to have it slipped away? Or, like, there has to be a middle ground there. Like, first, my question is, why are you blaming we the people? And how can we fix this broken trust in our own government, so to speak?
I blame we the people because we failed at the teaching the rising generation to be free. We failed at teaching what the Constitution is supposed to mean. We failed at teaching, well, what rights are, where they come from. According to our founding documents, according to the Declaration of Independence, our rights come from God. And government is instituted to protect our rights. That's their charge. That's, the Declaration of Independence says that the primary role of government is to protect our rights. But yet because of, in my opinion, we were too successful, too prosperous as a nation for so long that we put way too much trust in our government, and we stopped being the watchdogs and making sure that they were doing the job that they're supposed to do. Another example of how we botched this all up is, we've now bailed out banks, we've bailed out car industries, we've used tax money, which is our money, we the people's money, to bail out industries. Well, that actually came up really early in our country. In 1792, the codfish industry was failing. And it was the largest industry in the New England states at the time, 1792. Yeah. So Senate and Congress was working on this, basically a bailout of the codfish industry in 1792. And James Madison, the guy who wrote down the Constitution, he wasn't necessarily the author, but he was the penman. He wrote everything down. So you would think he'd understand it, right? If anybody understands the original intent of the U.S. Constitution, it would be the guy in charge of writing it down. Well, February 6th, 1792, Madison says, if Congress can employ money indefinitely to the general welfare and are the sole and supreme judges of the general welfare, they may take the care of religion into their own hands. They may appoint teachers in every state, county, and parish and pay them out of the public treasury. They may take into their hands the education of children, establishing in like manner schools throughout the Union. They may assume the provisions of the poor. They may undertake the regulation of all roads other than post roads. In short, everything from the highest object of state legislation down to the most minute object of police would be thrown under the power of Congress. And that is exactly what our government has done. We have taken this general welfare and expanded it to mean whatever Congress says is the good of the nation. Rather than our federal government being limited to the 17 powers given to Congress in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, we all have just acquiesced and let government do all of these things. And, well, that's not how it was ever supposed to be done. And the reason they're getting away with it is because nobody knows that anymore.
No. I don't think they don't. I think they do realize it, Peter, but I think it's truly because, we allowed our society to be so easily manipulated, so easily, corrupt by some of these politicians, in power. Most of these politicians in power for 40 plus years. You could see, just to name a few, you have your Maxine Waters, your Nancy Pelosi's, your Chuck Schumer's. When you get to a caliber of a level of power that high in a career of politics, you're gonna wanna hold on to that power like a person carrying the Olympic torch. You want to hold on to that torch. You don't want it to burn out. It's. You can go back to, as we close it out, you can go back to statements like Donald Trump, like the difference between a career politician versus an outsider like him that actually is, making change. I want to be careful on how I say that because I know I'll trigger some people that may listen into this and everything. But, I support Trump because of the policies that he put place for America, the America First policies. And we haven't seen, a politician in a long time doing that. And I think that's one of the reasons why he gets attacked all the time, because of, and his mouth too. Sometimes his mouth, catches up to him. He bites his words in his own ass, so to speak. But as we close it up, I agree with what your book is representing there. Trust shattered, case of government betrayal, because that's what we're seeing, Peter. We're seeing that trust being shattered right in front of our eyes. I tell people all the time, there's some interesting times we're living through right now in our life.
Absolutely.
What you're seeing.
Yeah, I personally, I think we're standing at the edge of the cliff, and we the people collectively either decide that we're going to turn around and walk back down the hill, or we're going to fall off the edge of the cliff. And we're just about there, Peter. I think we're holding on to that like little teeny rock on the cliff, and saying, "Hey, can you help me out here, government?" Right.
No. Continue paying your taxes. We're going to tax the shit out of you.
Definitely.
Oh, you don't like paying almost $4 or $5 in gas? Tough shit. You're going to pay it still.
Yeah, you don't have a choice. You're going to keep paying it. So the book doesn't actually come out.
You have a choice. If you don't pay, you're gonna wind up ending up like the Amish, horse and buggy,
right?
So, Peter, I want to invite. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the book doesn't actually come out until May 1st, so you can pre-order physical copies at trustshattered.com. If you want an ebook, you can pre-order that just about anywhere you get ebooks. Audiobook will be up and available shortly. I just finished it recording it a day or two ago, so you'll be able to pre-order it too. But if you go to trustshattered.com and you pre-order a physical copy, paperback or hardcover, I've got the U.S. Constitution, an indexed version of the U.S. Constitution, where you can turn to the back and look up things like the general welfare. Well, that's in the preamble, and it's also in Article 1, Section 8, and it tells you where to find said thing in the Constitution. So pre-ordering at trustshattered.com gets you this really handy tool, because teaching the Constitution and getting more people to understand it is my ultimate goal in everything that I do.
You might wake people up, Peter. There's a whole collection of books, that he has there on Amazon, guys. Tremendous stuff from what is it? Tyrannical. Tyrannical King. There we go. Get the words in, Mike. Tyrannical King. With now your new book, Trust Shattered. I'm going to take a look at it, Peter, because it seems interesting. I'm not going to take a look at it because it has like really really cool looking graphics. It does. I love the graphics, by the way. With the Capitol and then the glass shattering. Tremendous vision of what our country is, because that's like when I look at America, I see America in a mirror, and with the glass shattering. That's what it represents. My vision of what I see America right now. And it's kind of sad to say that, folks, but I mean, seriously, that's what I'm saying. Peter, I want to thank you for coming on the show, buddy. And guys, pick up Peter's new book, Trust Shattered. Peter, how do you say your last name? Is it Serefine? Serefine.
Yeah, Peter Serefine.
Sounds like a new aspirin or something. Anyway, Peter, thanks for coming on, buddy. And guys, check his new book out, Trust Shattered, A Case of Our Government Betrayal. Wow. It looks like it's going to be a good one, Peter. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All righty.